Trade season in the NFL is off to a pretty blazing start, and with the announcement that DK Metcalf has requested a trade from the Seattle Seahawks, it's time to look at the top 5 potential suitors for Metcalf. So starting off the jump, I don't have Las Vegas as a top 5 candidate. I don't have Buffalo as a top 5 candidate. Buffalo because they just don't have the money, nor do I think they have the premium draft picks. I don't think they have a player of need for the Seahawks. I don't think Buffalo makes sense at all for the Seahawks to do business with, and I just don't think Buffalo can actually get the deal done. Las Vegas, I don't have here. I don't care about the connection between the Raiders and Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. That's not a good enough reason to just say that they're a top 5 candidate. I've even seen Green Bay thrown out as a top 5 suitor. I just don't think that makes any sense for the Seahawks to do. I wouldn't call Green Bay the biggest rival of the Seattle Seahawks, but there's a lot of history between the Green Bay franchise and the Seattle franchise. And I just don't see Seattle, like I said, giving a number 1 receiver to one of the teams that they've been a rival with in the past 2 decades. It might sound silly, but I would almost rule out every single team in the NFC from being a potential suitor. I don't think Seattle wants to see DK Metcalf on another team that they're potentially going to play every single year. And they definitely don't want him on a team that could do damage to them in the playoffs. So this is going to be a list actually not even almost. It's exclusively going to be AFC teams. At number 5, I have Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville just has, they have a franchise quarterback. And they're in a position, I think, in their mind, to get a number 1 receiver to pair with Brian Thomas Jr. and, see if this offense can take a step forward from where they were last year. DK Metcalf, however, does want to go to a contender, so I don't see them as a huge candidate, but, they're on the list. Next is the New England Patriots. Now, as much of a contender as Jacksonville is, New England is in the exact same boat in the fact that they are not contenders at all. But they're on an upward trajectory. They have a franchise quarterback. They have a great coach. They have potentially a good defense. They just need a guy who's a playmaker, who can get the ball in open space and make things happen. That's exactly what DK Metcalf has been his entire career. So I could easily see New England, there is history between the Patriots and the Seahawks, but it's not like this is some heated rivalry between these two franchises. You could easily see that these two teams could get a deal done. New England has premium, day 2 draft picks that could easily slot in as what the compensation would be for the Seahawks. Number 3, I have Pittsburgh, and this relies on a lot of things here. Pittsburgh is already a contender. Yes, they're not in the A tier of contenders, but they're in the B to C tier in terms of contenders. They're always going to be a 10-plus win team. They have one of the best coaches in the NFL. And there is the connection between Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. We've seen it since Russell Wilson left the Seahawks. Those two have had a pretty good relationship between the two of them. I could really see if Russell Wilson re-signs with the Steelers, that the Steelers end up being one of the main teams that DK Metcalf wants to go to. And the Steelers really should be in the market for a receiver. If you look up the teams that spend the least amount of money on the wide receiver position, by far it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, I don't know how much you can rely on Roman Wilson going forward as a potential number 2 or number 3 receiver with George Pickens, and even in George Pickens' case, he's not the most reliable number 1 receiver in the world. So, just get a guy like DK Metcalf, who, you pair with George Pickens. Those are 2 guys who can make every single catch that is thrown at them. And again, like I said, with a connection between DK Metcalf and Russell Wilson, it seems like a pretty good fit, in my opinion. Number 2, I have the LA Chargers. I don't see a team that can provide a better quarterback, a better head coach, and a better wide receiver core around DK Metcalf. The defense isn't all the way there, and they're going to be losing a lot of key players that make them not as great of a contender as they were even last year. But this still is a team that you put together, like I said, the head coach, you have the quarterback, you have a receiver core with Lad McConkey, with Quentin Johnston, and you fit DK Metcalf in there, they become not only a better passing team, but in terms of, blocking around the edges at the wide receiver position, DK Metcalf is a great blocker for a wide receiver. Even going across the middle, DK Metcalf is an incredible option. So I think this is more of an option like LA would probably love to have DK Metcalf. I don't know how much DK Metcalf wants to go to the Chargers, but they're the number 2 suitor in my opinion. At number 1, everyone's going to hate it, but in my opinion, the number 1 suitor is Kansas City. Kansas City has a lot of work to do with their cap, but that work is pretty easy when you factor in that all it has to revolve around is restructuring Patrick Mahomes' contract, restructuring Chris Jones' contract, and you're pretty much there in terms of being able to trade for a receiver. Not only that, the receiver room for Kansas City is pretty bleak. They need to come away from this offseason with a receiver and at least 2 or 3 options offensively in general. And DK Metcalf, I mean, he wants to go to a contender. What better contender is there other than the Kansas City Chiefs? Not named the Eagles, really. I mean, those are the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl this year. And I can't see Seattle trading DK Metcalf to the Eagles. I can't see that happening. I don't see them trading him to the Chiefs just because of the, I guess the scrutiny that would be involved in that deal. But, if you get a first round pick out of the Chiefs, which I would almost guarantee is impossible with what the trade market has been for receivers in the last 10, 15 years. But if you can somehow manage to get a first round pick out of the Chiefs, you're golden in terms of you don't have to see DK Metcalf very often. I'm almost never going to see him in the playoffs unless the 2 teams meet in the Super Bowl. And the thing is, DK Metcalf is having an expiring contract after this year. And as bleak as the contract and cap situation has been for the Chiefs this year, it gets even worse next year. So I don't see a reason why, if I'm Seattle, you get possibly a pretty good draft pick from the Kansas City Chiefs. If not the first round pick, I would cut the phone call off if it doesn't include a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick, whatever it has to include, but it has to be at least 1 day 2 pick and possibly multiple day 3 picks. And I think if you're in Kansas City's perspective, what is a day 3, day 2 pick to you to get possibly a top 10 receiver to pair with Patrick Mahomes? The first time he's had that since Tyreek Hill left. And you still have Worthy. And you still have Rice that's going to come back from injury. And you still have whoever you're going to get in the first round this year if you don't trade that pick. Plus whatever you get in free agency. I think Kansas City makes the most sense in terms of teams that would want to trade for DK Metcalf and could make it happen. I think there's a few other teams where, at least if you're looking at it from Seattle's perspective, you could trade for some better premium picks like from Carolina or maybe from, the New York Giants in order to supplement what you're losing from DK Metcalf. But I just don't see those as teams that Metcalf wants to go to begin with. I don't see the Seahawks wanting to do business with a team that's in their conference. And I really think that Seattle's main objective is to just, we saw it with the roster moves that they made today already, with the releases that they made between Draymond Jones, Tyler Lockett, all of those guys that they released today. The obvious goal for them is to reset their books and try to build a team around whoever the next potential quarterback is after Geno Smith. Or maybe it's to build it around Geno Smith for 2 or 3 years. I don't fully know that aspect of it. But in terms of just getting the money reset, that's their main goal. So I think whoever presents the best option for them out of those 5 teams that I mentioned already, that's going to be the team that goes to make the move. And Seattle's going to make that move with them to offload DK Metcalf's contract.